So for this evening's talk, last week I started to teach a little bit about the mind, and I was again much more jet lagged than I am today, so I'm not quite sure how that came out. But nevertheless, this is something which is an important part of spirituality. You know, this thing which we call a mind, M-I-N-D, and it's such an important part that I remember just starting my search into the meaning of that mind, you know, even at university. And if there's anybody here who's ever studied that part of physics called quantum physics, you know that that's an important part, an essential part. It's the mind, observation, knowing, which actually they said collapses the Schrödinger equation, gives reality as you observe it. It's a case, you may have heard this before, but like life according to the physics is just probability theory. Just one thing is more probable than the other, and you make it real by an observation. It answered a question which many people have heard, who may have had a cup of coffee and talking about, discussing that proposition: if a tree falls in a forest and there's no one there to see it, does it fall? And there's an answer to that. It said it hasn't fallen yet. And it's not up yet, it's in between. In between a state of still being up there and being fallen. And it's only you find out which when something or somebody observes it. That may feel strange to you, but that's science. That's one of the reasons I liked taking science to that level, because it changed the way I perceived things. And I realized that what was logical or reasonable to me, you know, was actually just a fault in my understanding. I needed to expand my brain, if you like, to be able to accept truths which at first never made any sense. But after a while you could understand why they were truths. But that was only with like things and science. And I wanted to take that much further and to understand, you know, what this mind actually is. And that's one of the reasons I was very attracted to like a path called Buddhism, simply because the mind was front and center of, you know, the Buddhist path. It weren't so considered about, you know, life in this world, or becoming rich, or becoming even healthy, but even like in the evolution, it was more like the evolution of your mind from life to life as you go on from journey to journey, existence to existence, and how you can become wiser. And of course that means I'm already inferring the idea of rebirth, or reincarnation if you wish to call it that. That's an essential part of Buddhism. I know that sometimes people seem to say, oh, we should be secular Buddhist because many scientists don't believe in rebirth. Where's the evidence for it? And quite honestly, that I found quite offensive. The evidence is incredibly strong. In fact, it's so strong that I remember this one philosopher, somebody sent me a little video of a philosopher, some in university over in the United States. So look, quite honestly, he said, quite truthfully, as a philosopher, and knowing just what is truth and what is not truth, or rather how you can prove truth and not truth, the rebirth, reincarnation has been proved. The evidence is there. The only problem is that people don't like to believe that. And that's the thing which kind of shocked me. Not really shocked me, but interested me when I came to Australia. That was, you know, about 38 years ago now, as a monk. I couldn't understand why more people actually even doubted that idea. To me, it's a very beautiful idea, very attractive. Sometimes you have like kids die when they're very young. And I think that's so unfair. 6 or 7-year-old, 8-year-old. I've done many funerals for young people. And so they don't get another chance. If you do like a test to drive a car, if you fail, does that mean you can never drive a car ever again? No, it means that you can have another go. Learn from your mistakes, grow from them. Those of you who have relationships, if the first one doesn't work out, is that it forever? You can't have another go? The idea of having another chance, I can't see why people can't accept that. And it's also, that's where you get some really interesting stories. And so one of those stories is about, this is many years ago, and I'm just looking around to make sure the family aren't here. Because sometimes you say personal stories, and sometimes people feel that I'm intruding on their personal privacy. But this was a Thai couple, and she was having her first child. And everything, she was young, nothing wrong with her. Things were going perfectly in her pregnancy. She had, I think, an ultrasound about 5 days before the birth. But in those 5 days, the last 5 days of her pregnancy, the baby turned in the womb and cut off the blood supply in the umbilical cord. So the baby was stillborn. And you can imagine how that family felt. They were all excited, they had all the stuff there, for the baby, and the baby came out stillborn. And I know this personally because I knew that family and I did the funeral service for them. And they called that baby Charlie, a male. And it was really quite cute that when it came out, it was a fully formed kid, but it was just dead. I remember then a tiny coffin for the baby, lifting up the coffin, and we had a family photograph. And I was so honoured, they said, Ajahn Brahm, you have to come in this photograph. The family photograph of Charlie, their monk, and the whole family there. But of course, I think the reason I tell this story, that before the cremation happened, that when no one was looking, the family took out a simple biro pen and drew a line on the baby's heel. They had the idea, it was actually not an uncommon tradition in some parts of Thailand, that if the baby comes back again, they'll know it's that baby because they'll have a birthmark on there. And of course the reason I tell that story is because that's what happened. She was perfectly healthy. She got pregnant again, and so the next time they had a pregnancy, apparently the hospital gave her extra special, like VIP attention, because they didn't want it to go wrong again. And this time they gave birth to a little girl, and I know I won't tell her name. A little girl, and she has a birthmark on her heel, exactly as they put it. Now, as far as I know, that is Charlie reborn. And it does happen that if, that somebody is about to get born and a bit of bad luck, you might say, happens and they don't get reborn, it's pretty similar that you go to Perth airport and you've got a booking on a flight, but the flight's kind of overbooked. What does the airline company do? They say, well, look, I'm sorry, we can't get everyone on the plane tonight. If anybody will sort of give up their seat tonight, we'll give them an upgrade. Tomorrow morning, you're only on economy class, but if you can pull off until tomorrow, we'll give you first class. So that's often what happens. So little Charlie couldn't get into this life at the first shot, so managed to get there in the second shot with an upgrade. He was now a girl. I'm only just saying that, but that was true. And the interesting thing is, because I knew the whole story from the beginning, that when the new girl was born, I was really fascinated to try and see it and just understand how it behaved. And of course, when it came here, this was a long time ago, before we had this hall here. We used to do everything in what's now the community hall. She was a tomboy. Honestly, she hung out with the boys. She fought with the girls, but she was a girl. That's who she was in the previous life. She got reborn. And to me, that's kind of a beautiful story. A tragedy happens, and it's really unfair. A kid comes into your life, and they suddenly disappear. It's unfair. Of course they have another chance. Same as each one of you. I don't know, you may have known some people in this world who have some amazing sort of what you might call talents. You know, the Mozarts. How old was Mozart when he started playing the piano and composing? Was it 4? I'm 71 now and I still can't play the piano. But how on earth can that happen? And to me it's just so obvious. I was talking about this today at a dana. There was this one gentleman, again, I'm just checking he's not here today. He was one of our very regular members many years ago, and he was Scottish. But anyway, that he remember him telling me that from the time he was really young, he just knew how to fly an aircraft. No training. And he just knew how to do it. He didn't know where he learned that. So eventually after many years, just keeping this weird ability inside of himself, he decided to ask one of these hypnotic regressionists, can you please see if you can hypnotize me so I can find out who I was before or why I can actually fly an aircraft with no training. It was real. Well, you know who we went to go and see. One of our former presidents who was very good at this. And to be able to get a person into such hypnosis so you can remember things like past lives, you have to have this, give the people a sense of safety. They can relax. Because sometimes this is quite scary. It's one of the reasons why our Buddhist society in Western Australia, we want to make sure that everybody feels safe here. You won't be criticized or thrown out or whatever. You can actually come here and just relax. I just remember some of these beautiful stories of all the years I've been here. The one time I remember, I'm going off track here a little bit, but I'll come back to the stories of rebirth in a moment. There was one time during the half-an-hour meditation at 7:30 that there was somebody who just lay down, just over in the area over there. They lay down and they fell asleep. It's okay to fall asleep, but they were snoring very loudly. And then afterwards, some of the people over there, they thought they were doing the compassionate thing, that someone had felt snoring and they didn't want it to disturb other people's meditation, so they woke them up. And afterwards, I told the people off who did that. And I said, you didn't realize that that lady, she was a victim of domestic abuse. And she came here, and this was the first time she came into a place where she felt safe and welcome, so safe that she could lay down and let go of all of her defenses and fall fast asleep and catch up on some so well-needed sleep. So when I told that, I tell that to you too. If anybody falls asleep like that, you don't know where they've come from or what they've been doing. Please have that beautiful heart. Say, yeah, you can come in here, you can fall asleep, no problem. So anyway, that's one of the reasons why, for her to be able to fall asleep, she couldn't do that at home. The place felt safe for her. And that's so important for people's well-being. a place where you don't have to feel you have to do something or you'll be embarrassed. You can do whatever you like, basically. I shouldn't really say that totally. But anyway, just, feel safe here. So anyway, that this person who did the regression therapy, he's always makes people feel safe. He's got a very soft demeanour to him. So this Scottish man, he surprised himself by being regressed very deeply, very easily. And of course, what he remembered was being a pilot in his previous life. And he was in Wales, and he took off from Wales, ferrying equipment to Gibraltar. And as he was ferrying equipment, there was no conflict, no other fighters in the air challenging him. It was a very safe journey. But then when he came into land at Gibraltar Airport, this is in the 1940 or 41 or something, that his plane rudder was malfunctioning and he couldn't land properly, and the plane crashed. And he said that's where he died. And that's how he knew how to fly aircraft. When I first heard that, I thought, maybe coincidence or maybe just imagination. But at that time, in the monks' quarters, we did have a computer. I'm not good at computing, honestly. Ask the other monks. Sometimes I have to ask them what to do, what button to press. But my favourite button, my favourite button on a computer? Delete, yes. I love that button. But anyway, I just Googled in Second World War crashes, aircraft crashes, Gibraltar, and he got the record of it. And it just really kind of blew my mind. It was so easy to find. And there you had the record of what happened there. Pretty much exactly as he told me. And those are the sorts of things that, how on earth can you explain stuff like that? And it's not just one thing, it's a whole heap of stuff about people who remembered what happened in their previous lives and why they get reborn who they are right now. It makes it very important, to me anyway, because otherwise life can be so tragic and sometimes meaningless. Why are you doing this for? Your particular lifestyle and how well you're living it. It's a kind. It's, if I was a master of the universe, I would certainly allow reincarnation. If you don't get it right this time, have another go. As many times as you wish. Learn a little bit more each time. Become kinder. Become somebody who knows that it's not so important how much you have, but what you do with what you have. It doesn't even matter so much, honestly, how healthy you are, but what you do with the health which you have. How you make use of the resources which you have in this world. And why are some people really poor in this world? And sometimes it's tragic when you go to some third world countries and you see just how difficult it is for them to survive. But then you look a bit deeper. I always thought that when I first went to northeast Thailand, and that was again almost 50 years ago, and that was supposed to be a very poor country, especially in the northeast. That was the backwoods of a third world country. And when I went up there, I was staggered. They didn't have much to eat. They would share everything. They didn't have wonderful places to live. But again, there were so many people in there was so much laughter. And I still recall, some experiences, memories were etched into my memory. I remember going to this monastery in the middle of a very poor area of Thailand, and we were going to have a ceremony that evening, had a couple of hours to spare, so by myself I walked off into the forest, and I came across a little clearing, and there was such a poor house there, bamboo and thatch, and a huge amount of kids and the parents up there too, maybe uncles and grandparents, and the kids were playing around. and they were laughing with so much joy and delight. And I was just, basically I was hiding in the forest, just peering, like a paparazzi or something, making sure they couldn't see me. I didn't want to disturb them, because I was a white monk and that was very rare. So I wanted to make sure I could see and listen. And I've never seen, I don't think even in my life since, so much joy and happiness in a family. They were screaming in delight. And I never seen that, I never remember seeing that in my upbringing, even though I had a very kind mum and dad. We never, wanted for food. So the joy there was actually quite struck me. How much happiness can you have? And so that made it more important to understand. I always thought I had a good upbringing. Did you? It challenged ideas of what richness was, what wealth is. It's one of the reasons why when I became a monk I wasn't that interested in money at all. To this day you don't have any money. And sometimes you don't want it, honestly. Monasteries need money, but not me personally. It becomes a burden. And you don't have so much happiness and joy, honestly. So anyway, when we saw that, you understand, well, if you have some money, if you are wealthy, you're hard work, and it comes to you, fine, but it's not necessary. That is actually quite challenging, because the body needs the money to have a house. Or we say the 4 requisites in Buddhism: shelter, clothes, food and medicine. But what's more important for your happiness is this beautiful joy in the mind, the kindness, the love, the trust, all those sorts of things which we call the spiritual wealth. That becomes far more important. So many people, I've been going to a lot of Thai dhanas recently. There's a few Thai people here. When I first went to Thailand, it was called the land of smiles. Not these days, I'm being honest. Because people are far too serious. And they're rushing around far too much. I remember even after 7 years being in Thailand, that I went to the airport, the first flight back to London, and that would have been in 1990, I think. Yeah, about then. And 1981. First trip back to London. And when I went to the customs, the passport, to show the passport and the visa, I was fluent in Thai then, and so I showed my passport to the immigration officer, and I started talking in Thai, and he was quite surprised that my Thai was so fluent. So he started talking to me, I started talking to him, and in about 2 or 3 minutes, all the other immigration officials from each of their desks left their desks and surrounded me because they wanted to talk about Buddhism and what's a white monk doing, being a Buddhist, what's a white person doing being a Buddhist monk. They were so interested. So much so that there was a man who actually took me to that airport, a German man, and he came up and said, "Leave him alone, he's fine, he's just a monk going home." And I said, "Look, leave them alone, we're just discussing Buddhism and what I'm a monk." But they were all really interested. I kind of liked that very loose attitude in those days. They all came to talk to me, but once he'd broken the spell, they all went back to their desks and did their proper job. But the guy whose desk I was on, the immigration official, he said, "Oh, please come this way." So he took me into the departure lounge, and in those days, he just brought me a Pepsi Cola and offered it to me. He didn't really have anything else they could offer me. And then I said thank you, and then he sort of came running back 5 minutes later. He said, your passport, I haven't stamped your passport, can I have your passport back?" he'd forgotten something. Now I kind of like that they were just not so bound by the rules, and instead bound by this beautiful kindness. And that joy which they had there, they didn't have much money, they had a lot of friendship, a lot of kindness, which has been lost now. And sometimes I really appreciate that. Now when you find a partner in life, any one of you, what's the most important? How wealthy they are? How famous they are? How even healthy they are? Or how kind they are? Because that kindness is what's in the mind, in the heart. It doesn't exist in the body. And sometimes you see people who are just so incredibly kind. Their minds are very advanced. And those are the sorts of things which in the spiritual life of being a Buddhist monk, I think is really the most important. Because that is what goes from life to life, your mind, stream of consciousness from one life to another. That is actually what evolves. And sometimes I kind of like that idea. I've already given that one example of a little boy who died at birth and then was reborn as a girl. Wouldn't it be wonderful if each one of you, those who are girls, remember what it was like to be born as a boy? The boys, what it was like to be a girl in your previous life. So I get some more understanding of just the different people we live with. The people who are rich to know what it's like to be poor. I often say this, if you've ever been poor and really hungry, you can never pass by anybody who's raising funds to feed other people who's poor. You just can't do it, because you really know what it feels like. If ever you've been discriminated against because of how you look, or your gender, or your race, or your colour, or your sexual orientation, or whatever it is, if you've been discriminated against, how much does it hurt? Sometimes it's a knife which goes to places where people can't see the wound, deep inside of you. And once you've seen that and been there and you remember that, you can't just avoid anybody else who's experiencing such pain. That's one of the reasons why I tell people this is actually where you really learn what compassion is. You're not just playing a game and just see what a great Buddhist you are, how compassionate you can be. You're doing this because basically you don't really have a choice. You see a pain which other people can't see. You know it, you can feel it. It's stimulated in you, it's alive again. And you can't just leave a person alone, it doesn't matter if you're late. I remember one of those stories of when those monks, when one of the first places we went to from northeast Thailand was into London. And even though the place they had to live in for the first few months before they moved out into the forest was a house in a suburb of Hampstead. Now Hampstead is quite a posh suburb, but because they were now in a house, not in a forest, many of those monks felt so confined. They got used to the space of a forest. It doesn't matter how comfortable the house is, it should rather be in a cold, wet, damp, windy forest. You know how they felt. But they were getting quite depressed. I remember one of those monks told me they were looking out the window, just nothing to do. And when they were looking out the window, it's in the morning time, and it was a typical London drizzle. So the sky was grey. I think you know where this is going, but this is not the whole story, this is much more than that. All the buildings were grey. The road was grey. All the people wore grey overcoats and grey hats. Have you ever seen London? I was just there just a couple of weeks ago. London in the winter time, everything is grey. And even the tea they drink, Earl Grey. That's one of the reasons I refuse to drink Earl Grey in the wintertime. Give me something which is a bit more colourful. But anyway, it's one of those mornings, and he was looking in the window and just saw there was a person, middle-aged person, a homeless person, who was huddling in the doorway of some building in the early morning, trying to keep out of the rain. It's bad enough, the cold, but if you get damp as well, that can be very, very unpleasant, even very bad for your health. And I knew those people because I lived in London for so many years. Many of them would drink, mostly methylated spirits. They would never have a chance to have a bath or a wash, so they really stank. I remember that, the smell of the homeless people in those days. Anyway, this monk, looking through the window, what can I do to help this guy? But then, you saw this other gentleman walking down that road, the typical English gentleman, in the bowler hat, the umbrella, the nice suit, the suitcase, was just walking to work. And he saw this very well-dressed English gentleman stop by that stinky homeless man, bend over. He couldn't hear what was said, but saw afterwards this gentleman on the way to work putting his arm around this homeless man, lifting him up gently and taking him off to get some breakfast somewhere. And he said all the greyness of London disappeared in that moment, like a sun shone. An act of kindness, because that suit of that office worker would stink, from the smell of the homeless person. That didn't matter. What was important that he could help somebody who really needed it. And that's sort of something which is a beautiful part of what we call the heart, the mind. It doesn't matter about your clothes. It can always be washed. But to be kind like that, and someone could see that, was a beautiful thing to see. And that's one of the reasons why I said that the kindness, compassion, it just creates a sun in this world. It creates beauty in any place. So anyway, that's all part of this thing which we call the mind. And little by little, we actually learn to grow, to develop our mind in such a way. And so happiness is the most important. The joy, that is more important. Of course, being a monk, you don't have much opportunity to serve or help others. But I do remember, I'm picking up, all these talks are I'm going to say off the cuff, but I don't have a cuff. But they're just, you make it up as you go along, but they're all true stories. This guy, I remember going to Albany, not this time, I think the time before, and I gave a talk, and after the talk, it was very cold down there, the wind was blowing, it was actually almost like freezing. And this guy, I saw he didn't have a beanie at all, anything on his head. And he looked at me, he said, "You've got a nice beanie." And I said, "Okay, you can have it." And I just put it on his head. My head, I don't usually feel the cold, but I felt cold in my head, but I felt a great warmth in my heart. You'd actually help somebody. And I remember he said, that he's seen charity before. He said, but that was mega charity. It's only a beanie, I could get another one easy enough. But that made me very happy that day. You could actually help someone just with a little beanie. Or one of the other times over in Singapore airport, I was transiting to go somewhere, and on the previous flight, because I needed a bit of a rest, I had these iPads, which you put over your eyes so you can actually cut out the light. And I saw this lady. She was actually laid out, on a couple of benches, trying to get some sleep between flights. And she was tossing and turning. And so I thought, why not? I tapped her on the shoulder. Maybe I shouldn't do that as a monk. tapped her on the shoulder and gave her one of the iPads. I said, "Here, you have these." She didn't know me, I didn't know her, never seen her again. But just a little act of kindness like that, that made my day. It made me feel so happy. But it also gave her an hour or two of sleep. That is how we strengthen our mind. Those people who don't think we have a mind, that you just live this life and you die, and that's it, finished, gone. Then why would you ever want to do those things? You do those things because in the past, sometimes you know what it'd been like. Been like to be hungry. Been like to be rejected. You know, that no one loves you, no one cares for you. That's why I never want to reject anybody. You know, one of those stories, again, these stories just keep popping up. I just trust my mind to know which one is the right one to tell. There are times when people come into this room or go to Bodhinyana Monastery and people say, "You're not properly dressed. You've got to keep the dress code." And okay, you know, we're monks, yeah, I know, but we're not just weirdos. Maybe we are, I'm not sure, but not that weird. But anyway, there's this one temple many years ago, and when the person was actually giving a talk at the time, and this lady came in totally naked. She was young too, she's only about in her 20s, early 20s, totally naked. She came into the talk, and some of the people there said, "No, get out, you're not properly dressed to come into a talk." What is properly dressed? But anyway, the person giving the talk said, "No, let her come in." And one of the other monks gave her a spare robe to wrap around her. The person giving the talk was the Buddha. This was 25 centuries ago. And the lady who came in that day had lost her husband, her 2 children, and her 2 parents. That would drive most people mad. Her name was Patachara. And those of you who know the story, she was one of the most amazing Buddhist nuns, fully enlightened, and one of the great teachers. And I remember when I started reading these things, I remember reading about her, the tragedy of her life, and she lost everybody, and the kindness of a Buddha say, "Oh, come in, and get a robe around you, just to protect you." And she became, again, not just fully enlightened. When I was reading those stories in the Bhikkhuni, it's called the Terigata, about the enlightened Bhikkhunis, I was reading story after story after story about these women who'd become nuns, and they were having difficulty with their meditation. It was hard for them. They weren't getting very far. And then they would say this amazing teacher came. In a few days, they also became enlightened. When I read that, I said, "Who is this teacher?" That was Patachara. So if anyone naked comes in here, please let them come in. That could create so many more enlightened nuns at Dhammaloka. That's one of the reasons why sometimes we judge people. That's what a brain does. A mind sees much deeper than that. Please know the difference between a brain and a mind. If you want to know that difference, just read those amazing articles. I think I said this last week about Professor John Lorber, Lorber, quite a while ago now, but at Sheffield University discovered what he called the boy with no brain. 1% cortex, the rest cerebral fluid. Not enough by any means to run his brain or run his intelligence. He was first-class honours graduate in mathematics. A very wise man. But he didn't have a brain. Amazing. So if anyone says you, maybe someone, your boss at work is upset at you, say, you've got no brain. Say, yeah, I might be really smart. And what it was actually telling you is this, the brain and the mind are totally different things. You have all these other things that people remember, stuff from their past life. To me, I think that's fascinating. It gives you an indication of why you are who you are, what you're doing, why this is your life. You're learning a little bit more. And that, when I'm saying learning a bit more, that's not from Buddhism. That is from Plato. I don't know if any of you have ever read Plato's Republic. The Greek philosophers say that when you die, you go over the river Styx, S-T-Y-X, go to the Elysian fields, take a break. And the nice thing about Plato, I think one very wise thing which he said, you choose your next rebirth. I thought, wow, right on. Sometimes people choose to be a woman, to be a man, to be gay, to be LGBTQ, I always rush that, LGBTQIA+. They choose to be rich or to be poor. They choose this because they're learning. They need to increase some of their spiritual qualities in their next life to make them stronger. So much of the things, if you follow Plato, your life so far, a lot of it you've chosen. It's not somebody else's fault. You've chosen that because this is where you're going to learn the most. It can be painful. It can be hard. But how much do you learn about yourself and others by going through the difficulties of life? Understanding really what's important. I said something, I went to a Sri Lankan funeral, I think some of you were there, on Wednesday afternoon. And I said there when I gave my speech how much I enjoy going to funeral services. And I hope people took that the right way, because people always talk about the wonderful qualities of a human being at their funeral service and why they are such wonderful people and do such great service. To me, I think everybody should go to a funeral service once a week to remind you of what's important in life. Never has anybody said how wealthy that person was when they died, or how poor they were. They never say just how many houses they have, or what brand of car they drove. All they ever say is just their beautiful qualities, like how good a cook they were. It's those simple things which we think is just normal. But it's more than normal. These are just the aspects of your mental cultivation, your kindness, the love, what you give to whatever you're doing. To me, that was what was always the most impressive. It's actually teaching you what the meaning of life is. When you go to the funeral services, the end of a person's life, and they're describing to you what really matters. So that's one of the reasons I've been to so many funeral services, and when I can, I never just think, oh, another funeral service, that's depressing. It's never depressing. It's actually quite sort of uplifting for me. And to see what many of you here actually get up to. I see you in front of me, and just man, woman, but what do you really do? And that's when your friends and family start talking about you in the most wonderful, inspiring ways. So it's great. Those are the things which aren't physical, they're not material stuff. They don't say how beautiful you were, or how strong you were, or how many runs you made for Australia in the cricket match. No, they say just about the kindness, your gentleness, reliability, your softness, your ability, you just can't get angry or whatever. Those are the qualities which count. as far as I'm concerned. That's what I hear at funeral services. That's how you develop your mind from life to life, your kindness, your goodness. So please, any time you have the opportunity to be kind, to say to your... That's one of the other things which I was saying. We did a forgiveness ceremony at the Dana today, and I mentioned that the one time I've been in a glossy magazine, I forget what it was, I think it was New Idea or something. This was a Malaysian edition, because I did a celebrity wedding in Malacca a few years back. And it was only because I was giving some talks in Malacca and teaching a retreat there. There was one lady, she was following me on YouTube, and she saw that I was going there, so she said, "Oh, can you please just do the Buddhist part of her wedding?" I said, "Yeah, I'm there, why not?" I didn't know that she was quite a well-known TV star. She had her own show on the TV in Malaysia. And so it was a big celebrity wedding with lots of cameras. So it was mostly about her, but I got my picture in the New Idea or Vogue or whatever it was. I forget the brand name. But anyway, what she did, what she remembered from that wedding, because I saw her many times afterwards, she said, the thing which I said, which was most important, nothing to do with materialism, was said that every year on your anniversary of your wedding, can you please promise me that just the two of you will just have a quiet dinner together, or a lunch, or a cup of coffee, don't matter what, and do a forgiveness ceremony together, to say to your partner, whatever I've done by body, by speech, by mind, intentional or just by accident, or things I didn't do which I should have done, which have upset you or hurt you, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. You say it with sincerity, because you know you're not perfect. You have said or done something, or forgot to do something. And if they say it to you, you must always say, yes, I forgive you. And then the other partner says the same. So once a year they forgive one another. And she said because she was a celebrity, apparently very, very beautiful, and because she was a celebrity, very beautiful, their marriage kept together. They had a wonderful time together. They always said thank you to me. They may be even listening tonight, I'm not sure, but if they are, hope you're still remembering to do that ceremony, little forgiveness. So that way, your mind, he may not be the most perfect guy, she's probably not as beautiful as she was when she was young, but nevertheless, that's not what you fall in love with. You fall in love with people's character, their goodness, their kindness. So that says how important it is that we can grow from life to life in these beautiful qualities. And that's actually why we're here. The meaning of life is to grow. Not grow in our physical strength, but grow in our mental goodness and kindness. Thank you for listening. Very good. Okay, we've got a couple of questions. Okay. Is there any questions from the floor, first of all, from those people here? We got the internet questions? The none? Oh, here they come. Thank you. Because all these talks, you'll be amazed at how far they go to. I remember getting one of the questions here. It was, they said, from Mohammed in Saudi Arabia some time ago. I don't think that was the real name or the real place. When they put it up there, they got top of the list for answering the questions. Today we've got Czech Republic, Germany, Taiwan, and from RAM. don't know what that is. From the Czech Republic. Dear Ajahn, since I got in a certain deep state of meditation, I always expect this to happen again, which is disturbing my meditation. How to let go of this spiritual craving? Please remember that if you ever do get into deep meditation, it's beautiful, but understand why. What caused it? And it was not because you did something, it's because what you didn't do. You learn how to relax and not expect anything. This fellow from the Czech Republic, I'm sure that when that happened, you never expected it. It was quite a surprise for you. That's an important part of the experience. You can't plan these things. You let go, and then many times you meditate, nothing happens. But every time you meditate, please remembering you're getting credit. And when the credit gets to a certain level, then you get the paycheck. So don't want it. Wanting it is destroying everything. You said do not react when asked what to do when you're oversensitive, crying when overwhelmed by sadness or joy. How can I help and be compassionate to others? You know, sometimes you don't have to do something all the time to be compassionate to others. That time when I did a 6-month retreat, a personal retreat, that was many years ago, and I thought, my goodness, I'm not going to be helping anybody else at all. Other people have to give the talks and do my work for me and get my food for me. For 6 months, I didn't do anything to help others, so I thought. Then afterwards, they said, no, it was wonderful that we knew you were in Bodhinyana Monastery, being still, being peaceful. That was so inspiring for us. And anyway, that also helped me become a deeper, more compassionate teacher afterwards. So sometimes, to be able to, when you are oversensitive, crying when overwhelmed by sadness and joy, please do that. There's nothing wrong against the precepts with crying. And I've mentioned to you many times, there's many places where I cry. Over in India, there's one of the Buddha statues over there. It's called the Dhammaloka Buddha statue in Sanat. Every time I see that, I burst out crying. It's beautiful, and I can't help it. It just something just gets triggered in me, and this is why it's okay to show positive emotions. You know, sometimes I gave a talk about that many years ago about enlightened beings. Enlightened beings, are you supposed to be like some robot and never show any emotions at all? And you see something beautiful, oh yeah, that's beautiful. That's sad, oh yeah, that's sad. You know, that would actually, Buddhism wouldn't get anywhere that way. And the Buddha would never have actually got anywhere either. No, it's the positive emotions, the joy, the smiles. The smile comes from an emotional sensitivity too. And just be able to connect with another person. But it's the negative emotions, especially like anger and fear and depression. Those are the things which disappear. So if you need to cry, just go for it. Especially, there's a few times when I've heard beautiful Dhamma talks, and you do really cry. It's beautiful. And I can't stop that. So please, if you wish to cry, you're most welcome. Men especially, because we think, okay, girls, they can cry. Well, that's a bit sexist, I mean, discriminatory. But of course, men deserve to cry too. Many of the monks cry at my bad jokes. Anyway, okay, I'm only doing 4 questions. I've been having chronic pain for months. I understand impermanence. I need to be kind to open the door of my heart, but it's still hard to accept. Please advise how to accept. Sometimes it's, again, I often get this question, if you can see Opening the Door of Your Heart, that book which I wrote, there's a story there from the young boy, Jonathan Wilson Fuller, I think it was. Is that correct? He wrote about chronic pain. He was a young boy who suffered from everything. He wrote a poem about it. And the rain is a beautiful poem. And he said there is some point to it. That's life and peace in spite of the pain. And what was really important to me when I read that poem was that he was only about 7 years of age when he wrote it. Or 9, it could have been 9, but I think it was 7. It's in there and it's, wow. That little kid had so much wisdom. How he dealt with chronic pain. And I remember, because it was his poem, I saw it somewhere, I had to write to his, basically people who looked after him, can I please put this in that book? I said, yes, please. I want to make sure that poem goes far and wide. He's not into making money from it. He's into helping other people with chronic pain, and my goodness, he did. It's in the Opening the Door of Your Heart book. And last one, 2-4. I was not a good partner in the past and the relationship ended. I learned from my mistakes, great. But I feel I received no forgiveness and I've lost trust in true love. What should I do? Sometimes people think like that. And then somebody comes along and somebody you can trust. You know, there's many people have been like that. They had a relationship and it ended. You learn from my mistakes. Receive no forgiveness maybe from that partner, but you can receive a lot of forgiveness from everybody else who's been in that situation. And there's so many good people out there in the world. And sometimes even the person that doesn't forgive you, they're really suffering as a result of that. You can't ask them to forgive you, but you can always give forgiveness to them and give forgiveness to yourself. No one is obviously perfect. So you do make mistakes. And that's the best way we learn. I always feel that you cannot really understand what love is until you've had your heart broken. When it's broken, it gets all mixed up and messed up, and it starts to grow from that. You understand what real love is. Anyway, I should finish now because it's now 9 o'clock. So, thank you all for listening, and we can now just pay respects to the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha, and then if you do have any other questions, we can maybe ask them up here afterwards. Is that okay? Okay. Actually, I didn't ask any questions from people here. Okay. Okay, afterwards then. Okay, good. Okay, jag hang samma. Arahant Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhaṃ Bhagavantem Abhivademi Suakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Very good. Excellent. So those who want to ask personal questions can come up now. Other than that, we'll see you tomorrow, or especially for tomorrow.